Hello everyone, welcome to Homemakers Radio. It is a program designed to use to listen to while you walk or while you work, and I hope you come back from it very refreshed, and that I hope to just give you good news, although I might lapse a little bit. And so today, before you go, I would like to share with you my teacup. This is one of those Stetchcall Gracie teaware cups that I got at Home Goods a couple of years ago. Now you can also go to places like Ross. It's what we call seconds here, but it's new merchandise and it's like rejects, and they're very nice, very sturdy, and they don't have the metallic around them, so you can use them in the dishwasher, and they're just a little bit easier to use. And I also like to share with you some things that Mr. S has picked up for me that I thought were absolutely beautiful. So I'll show you the first one. It's these beautiful red leaves. Now there are trees around here that are red all year round. I've forgotten what they're called, but some of these leaves are from trees that are just this dark color all year round, and I'll include that in a picture. If you're new here, please click the link in the description box and go to the post where this video is embedded, so you can see the summary and you can see the photographs of the other things around here. And I often do scenery around the manse, and I often do indoor scenes, and maybe include other links and a poem, anything like that, and also references to things I have shown you. And so please go and do that, where it is a better atmosphere, I think. Now, I don't have comments on the channel, but you can leave a comment there. And also my PayPal is on the side if you want to contribute, which is very, very, very helpful. And I appreciate all that all of you do for me. You don't know how much it means to me. And I'm going to start out the day by starting the day and getting yourself cleaned up and dressed up and looking beautiful. And the reason for this is, if you get up in the morning and you decide, now this is, not everybody is the same. Yes, but Lizzie, not everyone is the same. And if you get dressed up for some of the most menial tasks, you feel a better purpose in it. Now, I like to get up, get on my little rebounder, and I also like to have a cup of tea, and I'll check all my things on the email, and I always check my bank accounts, because I learned years ago that if you don't, sometimes it's hard to get back in them. And I don't like to be obsessed with it, but it's nice to know down to the penny how things are going. And also, so what I decided to do is, instead of spending the first hour sitting there in my sleeping clothes doing all that and doing my exercises in my pajamas, I would go into the bathroom, get all cleaned up, get dressed up, and do all that with purpose. I have letter writing day, and I'd like to share that with you in another video of how I dress up for it, and how I have a special desk, and the person that I'm answering, only her letter will be there. I won't have a big stack of other people's letter, because all I want to do is focus on this person, and I won't be pressured to think about other people's letters. I'm just going to answer one, and how I have found so many beautiful paintings from the 17th and 18th and 19th century of women writing letters, and what the artists depicted them as. I'm sure it was probably more romantic than it was, but the women in their beautiful shawls writing a letter. And I know that the Jane Austen book that I have been reading by Brian Koslowski has just inspired me so much. And he didn't have a chapter on Jane Austen and letters, but you could write one because how many times have you seen it in the books? And so today I'm going to read to you. We will talk some more about other things, but I wanted to make sure that my voice would hold out for the reading. So I'm going to start out with the third eclectic reader. Now, it's not electric, it's eclectic, meaning it's a variety of poetry with sayings, with literature, with stories, with moral teachings. And this is a reprint, and it says on it the original McGuffies. So the original McGuffies wouldn't have said that. So this is a reprint and it's brand new. I like the new pages, and you may even have one of these in your home and not realize how valuable it was. They're not colorful. They don't grab you. When you pick them up, they don't jump out at you. But once you start reading them, you realize the pure gold that they are. And recently, and this is the original was in 1837, and every year it would go through a revision where they would put new things in it and take old things out. And so they're not all going to be exactly the same. And there's also a Christian school edition, which is excellent too. But this is the one that I have, and I'm going to read this to you, and it was on the Bible. Do you remember the last video where I said the rule? There's always a rule at the beginning of every chapter. Let me just read a rule for one of the other chapters here so that you understand this. And this was called the Effect of Rashness. Now, I may have read this to you before about rashness, and I do want to go back and read this, but I'm going to finish the one that I had begun on the Bible. And even if you are not a Christian, you need to know what is in it just for the value of it. And so this is called the Effects of Rashness, written in 1837. And this is about the book itself, and it's called The Third Reader. The rule is, hold your book up well and do not bend forward. See, they had to sit like this with their book up like this, and they weren't allowed to bend forward towards the book. Have you ever thought of that concept and how that changes your breathing and changes your mind, in effect, as to how you understand? This is so important. We were taught these things back in the 1950s, although I don't think it continued after that. But let me just read this. Hold your book up well and do not bend forward. Speak each word distinctly and be careful to pronounce correctly. Endeavor to understand what you read. You know, those are 3 little rules, and at the beginning of every little chapter, there are rules. So those rules would be worth just saving and writing in a copybook. And, you know, you could get this and you could do that. You could just write these in a copybook, the rules. And they are not so much rules as deep, abiding principles to live by. So endeavor to understand what you read. I was discussing with my daughter the other day about all the people over the years that her and I met when we were in the homeschool, more deeply into homeschool together. And she was very young, on how people we met that had not had books on comprehension or had not been taught to try to understand what they read would read something, a story or anything, and come to the wackiest conclusion and get off on a tangent somewhere that wasn't helpful at all. And their mothers would be sitting there going, and so it's really important to train your mind away from foolishness. You know, the Bible says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So you can correct them through this kind of teaching, and you can correct yourself from being silly and coming to wrong conclusions. And if you find people shaking their head a lot around you because of the stuff you say, this might be valuable to you. So let me continue in the Bible lesson. It was called the Bible. The first thing we learned was read for improvement and not for show. And then the other part of the rule was this will prepare you for a right performance in the duties of life. And I discussed the fact that freedom is the obligation to do your duty in life. That is freedom. When a government, a despotic and tyrannical government, takes away your obligation, takes away your responsibility to do what is right, then it's worth standing up for, because if they're taking away your ability to breathe and to live and to be able to function as a human being and to teach your children and to have fresh air and sunshine, then you know that that's not wrong, because God breathed the breath of life in us, in man. When he was first created, he breathed the breath of life in them. I don't see anywhere in the Bible where it gives mankind the permission and the duty to take away that privilege, which was given by God. And so we discussed what the Bible means, and it is a book, and it means book of books. So the word Bible itself is not sacred. It just means book of books. I believe it's Spanish, biblioteca, and it just means a book of books. It's a collection of books. So you'll have people writing large volumes of things where it's a collection of books, and it'll be called the Cake Bible or the Mechanic's Bible. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's not being disrespectful. So let us go on to number 2. Now, they have labeled all the paragraphs with a number, which is very handy, because if you've got a couple of children and you want them to read, I wouldn't mind having some ladies here and just doing an 1837 day and having them take their turn, and we could just pass the book around and we would know where we were, number 2, number 3, number 4. So let's read the 2nd chapter, okay? The excellency of the Bible. That, by the way, is one of the spelling words at the end of this chapter, is excellency. Here are the spelling words. Spell and define. Immortality, excellency, uninspired, supernaturally, antiquity, fabulous, transforming, superstition, and inspiration. Oh, and they have another chapter on it too. So one of the things that I loved about homeschooling my children, now I grew up in a public school and I could see a vast difference, and I wanted to tell you something that I remembered about it that was almost, it brought my heart to such sadness. I could remember it and feel it as if it were happening. In public school, when they were teaching us a new way of reading, which was not phonetic, they had readers, and these readers were the most banal, boring things you ever saw. And some of us that had caught on to reading, okay, and could read them rather fast, but the teachers would hold us back and we weren't allowed to turn the page and see what else was coming up or what else was happening, because they thought we would go through it too fast and then the other children hadn't caught up yet. So that was the saddest thing, to go to school and to know that you were not allowed to read beyond what the class was doing, beyond what the group was doing. And yet at home, we saw our mother, we observed her reading, and she would read, and she had a very fluent style of reading, even though she was only, I would say she went to a few months of 8th grade. And she was brought up on the prairies in Canada in the 1930s and 40s, and she was a fluent reader. And when she read, our minds could stay up with her, and then she'd turn the page just before we lost interest. And she'd be reading, and we were interested in. But this public school had a reader that was so bad that it just repeated the same one-syllable words over and over, and there was no story in it. And a lot of the children became reading disabled because of this, and a lot of reading failures took place because of this. But I just remembered that sad, painful experience of not being allowed to turn the page in a book. All the children had the same book, but it was so boring. And school could just suck the life out of you because of the uninteresting way in which it was presented. I think that's a crime. I just think that's like Karl Marx had said, that he would make church so boring that no one would want to go. And in a way, he succeeded, because of the teaching methods of the public school often rolled over into the way the church taught and preached and educated people in the Bible became so uninteresting. It is so sad, but we can correct that all in homeschooling. You don't have to participate in that. You don't have to be a victim of that. So now, after my little lecture, I want to read the second paragraph in McGuffey's original reader, number 3. Now, first reader, second reader, third reader does not mean first grade, second grade, third grade, because this is college level. It's just that when you finish the first, you go to the second. And one thing that we learned was we did not have to rush through anything. We could dwell on a paragraph for a month. You could make the third reader last for a year or more. You could go on into 6th grade with this, or 7th grade, or 8th grade if you wanted, because the mind would expand a little bit. You'd understand it a little bit differently. So let me read this. The excellency of the Bible might be proved sufficiently from its sanctifying and transforming influence upon the minds of all who read it with a proper spirit. I don't need to read any more sentences from that paragraph because that one's loaded, isn't it? So you will need to know what these words mean: excellency, sufficiently, sanctifying, transforming, and influence. So let me read it again, and then we can dwell on it. The excellency of the Bible might be proved sufficiently from its sanctifying and transforming influence upon the minds of all who read it with a proper spirit. How many times has it been when someone discerned in you an understanding spirit, even though you didn't say anything, and concluded that you had had some knowledge of the Bible? Isn't that lovely? How a little, it's like the Bible talks about a seed or leavening, and how a little leavening leavens the whole lump. It'll make it grow. You can just read a little bit, read one sentence in the Bible, and it can get a grip on your mind, and it can transform you and purify you in such a way that somebody will notice, even if you're not talking. So, the excellency of the Bible might be proved sufficiently from its sanctifying and transforming influence upon the minds of all who read it with a proper spirit. Even Charles Darwin admitted, after he saw the natives of a country in, I believe, South America, the change that it made in them when someone came and taught them the Bible and taught them how to live according to those standards. He admitted that his theory of evolution was wrong. Now, of course, he did not make that theory up. That came from, that was floating around for centuries before that, too. The ancient Greeks put it forth, and some of them believed it, but he admitted that he was wrong. And, of course, you'll never hear about this in any public school book or any news media or any historical records, but the homeschoolers have excellent history books that would record that he admitted that these peoples, he had been to visit these people, and they were very wild, and they had no concept of how to love their brother and how to survive and how to behave themselves morally. And then when he went back to visit after this church had gone there, he saw such a change in them. Now, you can just look things like that up for yourself if you can still find it. Some of the things that I used to be able to read about him on the web are not there any longer. So I don't need to reread that. But let me continue this. This is manifest, and that's another word for you, more especially from the fact its having God for its author. That God is its author is evident from its being the only book which teaches everything that our Creator requires of us, either to know, or believe, or do, that we may escape his deserved displeasure, obtain his sovereign favor, and dwell forever in the bliss of his immediate presence. How many politicians have you noticed that were transformed? I mean, it was gradual, but you can see how they've grown since they've had the Word of God as their guide. And I have observed this in the politicians that maybe come on, you see them on video or you see them on in public, and compared to when they first came out and now, because they stand by the Word of God, they stand by, they're for life, and they're for liberty, and they're for saving the souls of human beings, how changed they are in their demeanor, and how much more kindness exudes from their face, and how happy they are, and how much more, I guess, humor they have. Since knowing God, you can relax and you can be happy. Obtain his sovereign favor and dwell forever in the bliss of his immediate presence. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but I want to talk about his immediate presence. I know in this crazy world that we're living in, where everything is so chaotic in government, home has become everything, hasn't it? And that's why we're making it more luxurious, and we're doing more activities at home. We've got our little exercise room. We are going to our beauty shop and doing our hair, and we're ordering things to take care of ourselves better. And I even found a site, a video where you could learn about posture and how to walk more gracefully. And we are putting ourselves through courses and improving ourselves. And this is what helps us to understand the bliss of his immediate presence. We've now been free to think and to understand and to think about what we're doing. And we're no longer pulled around by the world, going here and going there and meeting a deadline and being under bosses. And now we're home, and now we have to regulate ourselves. And this idea that the bliss of his immediate presence, and I know in this craziness people are saying, well, we don't have to worry because Jesus is going to come right now, and it's a sign that Jesus is going to come. What about the bliss of his immediate presence? Those of us who have obeyed the gospel and are following his will and reading his will, his last will and testament, the New Testament, the Bible, we feel the bliss of his immediate presence. We have his immediate presence. Those who obey him have his immediate presence. So he's with us all the time. So like the Apostle Paul said, whether I'm present in the body or out of the body, it's the same. Whether or not we're alive or have passed on, we still have his immediate presence. So I'm not worried about that. I don't see anywhere in the Bible where we're required to make predictions or speculate on the coming of Christ. We are to dwell forever in the bliss of his immediate presence. He is present with us all the time. And that brings me to the Jane Austen Diet book by Brian Koslowski, because he brought out the fact that the Austenites spent a lot of time outside admiring the foliage, admiring the scenery, going for walks. It was considered very romantic. And a long time ago, when you went on a date, instead of going to a place that was booming with noise and music and crowded, the date found the most pleasant place to go with the most beautiful scenes, because it created memories and you could take pictures, and you might have music, but it would be pleasant. And so you feel the presence of God more when you are observing in quietness his creation and spending some time outside and in the air. And also, the exercise wasn't a formal exercise, which he brings out, that it was walking or running. And the idea was to look healthy. And now, of course, it's been translated into looking really fit and muscular and strong and thin. And he does have a chapter in here about how thinness was not necessarily health. But I don't want to use that as an excuse not to lose that extra weight, which could be harming our health. But I want to read the prologue of this book. I have read several of the chapters. I'm sorry that I have skipped around, but I used it to supplement other things that I was talking about. So today I'm going to read the prologue, and I have to tell you, this has had such an effect on me. I do wish that he had several other chapters, such as I suggested, Jane Austen and letters, but what about Jane Austen and singing? So I have a mandate for you today, and it's a biblical mandate, and it's sing and make melody in your heart. And so that's a biblical mandate that I have for you today. And but it's not really me, it's the Bible. And so you can choose whether or not you want to. A mandate is not a law, but it is a suggestion. And I, like the governors, I can choose not to do it and tell you that it's a mandate for you, because isn't it rules for thee but not for me? Isn't that the way they act, the governors and the premiers? So I won't be singing out loud to you, but you can go to a place by yourself and sing. And even if you have a tiny little space in your outside behind your dwelling, you go and sing something. Just sing something. Get used to it. Get used to the sound of your own voice. I think because we've had so much commercial music and instrumental music, we're used to having all the singing done for us, and we don't hear people sing. We don't hear ourselves sing. We're embarrassed about our own voice. I would suggest you go and sing. So that is a biblical mandate for you. So this is the prologue of this book, The Jane Austen Diet. Now, I'm not suggesting that you run out and buy this. It is a little more salty in speech than I would want to read to you because I don't have the same sensibilities. So, what can Jane Austen teach us about health? See, he calls it the Jane Austen Diet book, the Jane Austen Diet. But it's not a diet, it's about health. And I think a lot of people bought it because it said diet, and we were quite keen on Jane Austen. It was the cleanest novel that we could get in homeschooling for our children, and they enjoyed it. And later, after we got the books, it wasn't long after we got the books that the movies came out, and so we were just delighted with that. But the books still had a lot more in them. So, what can Jane Austen teach us about health? An English spinster from the 1800s sitting snugly beside a dish of tea and crumpets. I love how he said that was a dish of tea. This teacup was not always called a cup of tea. It was a dish of tea. I like that. And, of course, they might have poured it in the dish. I don't know. I know up in Alaska during the homestead days, they poured their tea and coffee in the dish and drank it because it cooled it more quickly. But we didn't do that. It's a bit messy. An English spinster from the 1800s sitting snugly beside a dish of tea and crumpets. You know, I have tried to make crumpets. I really believe as much as we can, we should make our own stuff. And you can get the crumpets already made at the grocery store, but you need to read the ingredients. There are things in these commercial breads that are not good for you and may be contributing to our problems, our health problems. So the only thing I can say about making crumpets is try several different, a lot of you probably have all the books, the tea books and the tea recipe books, and just try a different one each time and see which one works the best, and try to make your own crumpets. You know, they're the English, I don't know if there's a difference between the English muffins and the crumpets, so if you're very British, please tell me what the difference is, if there is, but I always assume they're the ones you can slice open and they have a lot of holes in them, which are quite pleasant when you toast them or heat them and put butter and honey over them. I don't like honey very much, but you might, and I might make a mandate that you have a little honey, but I won't eat it because it's rules for thee and not for me, because I don't like it. An English spinster from the 1800s sitting snugly beside a dish of tea and crumpets. The image doesn't exactly scream food and fitness guru for the 21st century. Too modest to even include a kissing scene in her romance novels, how could she possibly understand the complicated body, beauty, and weight loss battles we face today? That sounds like Linda Lichter when she wrote, not exactly, but it reminds me of Linda Lichter when she wrote Simple Social Graces or The Benevolence of Manners. She said that after studying the Victorians and their lifestyle and through their letters and their diaries, she said that they would have been puzzled at our obsession with certain things that didn't bother them at all. And this is similar, the physical fitness movement and the obsession with food. I'm talking about we don't want too many carbs, and we don't want too much this and too much that, and they did not do that, and they would be puzzled at our obsession with it. How could she possibly understand the complicated body, beauty, and weight loss battles we face today? A lot of it is the commercial food. It's got stuff in it that causes us to gain weight. Because even if you were at home and you ate everything at home and you made your own bread and you only ate things that you made yourself at home, your breads particularly, and it had maybe a bit of cane sugar in it and had wheat flour, you would still be healthier than what you buy at the grocery store. Plus, you would have to do all that work to bake the bread and you would lose all the calories. More to the point, did Jane Austen ever diet? A diet of what, pray? Plum pudding and port wine? You know, I don't know what plum pudding is. Does it really have plums in it? These were the questions buzzing through my brain in 2016, the year Austen revealed her extraordinary answers. Though it happened as Jane herself would admit by most fortunate chance, two types of books had plonked themselves on my nightstand that year: the latest health and wellness book for serious reading, and Jane Austen novels for fun. Both arrived for no other reason than pure vanity. My 30th birthday was fast approaching, and I had a third life crisis on my hands. To use a more Regency-appropriate metaphor, I was losing the bloom of youth. Everything I took for granted in my early 20s, naturally high energy levels, the ability to eat anything without consequences, the genetically slim physique I thought was my cosmic birthright, was disappearing, and I wanted it back. The health books were there to make that happen. Austen was simply there, as any self-respecting Anglophile will tell you, to provide moral support for the journey. She ended up providing so much more. I noticed it almost immediately, that is, after rubbing my eyes from the shock. There were details in Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility that paralleled almost exactly the latest discoveries in the most modern dieting books available. In one moment I would read about the newest scientific research on eating, exercise, and holistic living, and then realize moments later that Jane had said the same thing, albeit with more elegance and wit, over 200 years ago. It happened too frequently to be a fluke. The more I read, the more Austen was amazingly rubbing shoulders with the brightest minds in health, food, and total body wellness 3 centuries ahead of her time. To quote Lydia Bennet, I was ready to die of laughter. This was not the Jane Austen I thought I knew. My Austen wrote Regency romance novels, not diet books. She's the woman who ruins love lives with impossible Darcy-level expectation, who makes us want to cuddle up with 6-hour reruns of Pride and Prejudice, until, I am told, we know every intimate crease in Colin Firth's palm-wetted shirt. It was all very simple. My Austen was narrowly occupied with matters of the heart, and possibly a man's paycheck, but certainly not health. And yet I couldn't ignore the facts. Health is mentioned with inescapable frequency in Jane's classic novels, popping up more than 100 times in those 6 slim books. From Northanger Abbey to Persuasion is the other universally acknowledged truth of Austen's observant pen. Where health is at stake, nothing else should be considered. Quotation. The idea is more ubiquitous than marriage proposals, rich gents looking for pretty wives, or bad boys with surnames starting with W. In Austen world, gaining health and happiness in life is just as prized as a one-way ticket to Pemberley. It's one of the recurring themes of Emma, and the focal point of Austen's last unfinished novel, Sanditon, set where else in a seaside health resort. I've never read that one. In Jane's own words, a picture of health is painted over the entire canvas of her work, how to lose it, and more importantly, how to obtain it. And he mentions the canvas of her work. It reminds me of the art lessons that I have been following online, and the canvas pictures that I've been painting, and how they have reading this book and the quest for natural health has changed even the way that I paint, and that fresh bloom of health and color and natural nature type scenes has changed the way that I paint. And it influences the way her characters eat, move, think, and let me just back up here. In Jane's own words, a picture of health is painted over the entire canvas of her work, how to lose it, and more importantly, how to obtain it. If you haven't read the books and you want to watch the videos from the 1990s, they are the best in my opinion. I've seen the older ones too. But how many times someone who's sickly is portrayed in these videos, and how well they do that compared to, and how the desirable attainment would be good health, and how they compare it. It influences the way her characters eat, move, think, and feel, giving them fresh life and vigor, a la Lizzie Bennet. or a flabby existence of ill health and a great deal of indolence a la Lady Bertram. And if Austen's healthiest characters share one thing, it is that they are all on a sort of diet, in the older sense of the word, from the Greek dieta, meaning way of life. Yeah, we talk about our diet. We say, what is your diet? Well, it was changed back in the 1950s or 60s to mean a strict protocol of what you eat. You have 1 cup of this and 1 cup, and doctors would send it home, and it was called a diet, and it was just ruined everything. It should have been like Mr. Gibson said in Wives and Daughters, no more rich food, and go outside and get some fresh air, and you can have a little cheese, but lay off of the rich food. And I remember back in the 50s when the older ladies thought they had gained too much weight, they just stopped eating candy and sugar. They just cut out the cakes, candy, sugar, pies, and it helped. And the reason that they were able to do that is because they didn't restrict themselves on anything else, because they identified the weight gain as being from those things. And if Austen's healthiest characters share one thing, it is that they are all on a sort of diet, in the older sense of the word, from the Greek dieta, meaning way of life. They all embrace a set of healthy lifestyle routines that unfailingly tend to promote their happiness. I love how she used happiness as a theme throughout her novels, as equally and lastingly as falling in love. And admittedly, I had forgotten the most basic lesson from High School English Lit 101, that Jane Austen wasn't technically a romance novelist at all. She was a didactic novelist, a teacher. And what didactic novelists do, when done well, is absolutely magical. They observe life, and all that makes life better, then pass those lessons on to the readers through inspirational clues subtly woven into their stories. Like the best motivational speakers, the ultimate goal of didactic novelists is to paint such a breathtakingly better picture of life on the page that readers are subconsciously inspired to imitate it in reality. That Austen did this with her achingly accurate picture of love is undeniable. Less well known is her equally enviable picture of health. And I used to like to read stories and books back in the olden days that could actually describe a scene so well. They could take you anywhere in the world and in any climate or weather, and you felt it because their writing was so excellent. And they were also very, very conscious of making the reader They were respectful of their reader, so they didn't take their reader somewhere like the modern novels. I noticed a change in the 1970s where the modern novelists, all of a sudden, all the stops were pulled out, and you could start a book, and then it would take you into this horror and just shake you up so bad. But in the olden days, they were conscious of, they were courteous of their readers, and did not do things to them that once in a while they might take out one of the characters that you'd become fond of, but other than that, not so much. Who among us hasn't been inspired, even subliminally, by the effervescent health of Jane's most beloved characters? Lizzie happily goes on a 3-mile frolic to Netherfield. They did go a lot. They did walk a lot. And so since I have been reading this book aloud to you, I have not neglected to go out, especially when there's sunshine. And now we have all the leaves have fallen. So what I've been doing is putting on my rubber boots, my waterproof boots, and going out and kicking those leaves around and just listening to them. As a matter of fact, there are a few people who put every day something on a video on YouTube to that are sounds of a season or a day, and they'll have one for Thursday and one for Friday, and depending on the season you're in, you can click on what you want to hear, and they will have rustling leaves, crackling fires, and in the summer they'll have ocean waves and exotic birds and wind, and so everyone knows this appeal is so great, but why not experience it yourself? And I think you should deliberately do it. And if you're raising children and you're trying to homeschool them, you take them out to your backyard or front yard, and you plan some kind of an experience for them, a little nature walk for them, and have a little box or basket or bag to put things that they can pick up, a feather, a rock, a cone, anything like that, and bring it in. And we used to create these little nature vignettes in a tiny dish, and just something like that to appreciate it. Lizzie happily goes on a 3-mile frolic to Netherfield, her fine eyes sparkling the whole way. Catherine Morland eats whatever she likes, guiltlessly enjoying a healthy appetite while still managing to slide into her svelte ball gown, no suck-ins ever required. Marianne Dashwood practically glows with energy. There was a life, a spirit, an eagerness which could hardly be seen without delight. Even dowdy Anne Elliot gets a full-body reboot in Persuasion, naturally growing in bloom and freshness the more her story progresses. Now, if you'll watch one of the 1990s edition of Persuasion, you can see this. Anne is very, very, I would say, depressed, plain looking. Nothing wrong with being plain, but very doing just the least that she can with her appearance. And then after the story starts progressing, there's a little curl in her hair, and there's a blush in her face, and there's health, and her posture and the way that she's holding herself is even differently, if you would like to watch that. She was looking remarkably well. It's the sort of statement one hears so often in Jane's novels. Now, you notice they had gossiped about Jane quite a bit in Persuasion, and someone said they hardly knew her, or she just didn't look like herself, and they wouldn't have recognized her. And then towards the end of the story, she regains this youthful, exuberant look of great health. It's the sort of statement one hears so often in Jane's novels that a definite pattern emerges. Living in Austen world doesn't just get you a cushy marriage proposal. It often gets you a body guaranteed to turn more than just one top hat. The inspiration, or envy rather, was unbearable. I had to test this out for myself, seeing that I was on the verge of looking as frumpy as Anne Elliot, circa chapter 1. Piecing together the lifestyle clues in Jane's novels and personal letters, I put myself on the same diet of ideas that Austen prescribed for her smartest characters. I think that he was extremely clever to pull this stuff out of the Jane Austen novels and seeing more in it than most people would, and giving it more value than even the commercial world has ever given it. Like I say, there's other things that went on in these books that we could pursue, like music, the Austen world music, and just Austen world, like I said before, writing and reading. The way I ate, exercised, and thought about my body, even the way I woke up in the morning and went to bed at night. Well, see, that's another thing that you can learn from some of these old books, is how they retired, how they ended their days, how they started their days. And I loved it when I was reading to you before about how they went for a walk before breakfast. And so I've been doing that. I've been trying that. They went outside before breakfast. But ladies, get yourself ready, dress up, and do it properly so that you know that you are having an event and that it has meaning to you. And I always like to get dressed up and wear something pretty because I think that the nature deserves it. I'm going to do it for the flowers. And I read some quote that I've told you about before. Can't remember who said it. And this lady said, I must dress up today. It was in the 1800s because I'm going to visit my flowers. Even the way I woke up and in the morning and went to bed at night would be filtered through Austen's unique insights. In short, I would attempt to live within Jane's total picture of health this side of the 21st century. I like to think this wasn't as mentally unhinged as traipsing off to Camp Netherfield for Austen-obsessed nutters, though some family, he must be British, though some members of my family would gladly disabuse me of the conviction. This is one thing that this book has made possible, is that people that I have known that really wanted to live more of a Jane Austen lifestyle, whether it was just their activities or the costume or anything else, were looked at as rather extreme. And now, because he's written this, we all feel very accepted. In fact, I might sit here in my Jane Austen costume next time I read to you, because it feels real normal now. My life, after all, is about as far removed from the realities of Regency England as physically possible. Living in a mostly asphalted suburb of South Florida is hardly conducive to frolicking over green pastures with Lizzie Bennet. Furthermore, my other tether to sanity was that I had no intention of stooping to Regency reenactment eating, i.e., eating anything other than what I could easily find in my modern American fluorescently lit supermarket. Ugh. I predict that since this crazy political time, that things are going to change regarding food and shopping, and we're going to go back, which I hope, to the shop at the end of our road or the end of your neighborhood, run by a family with garden-grown things that people have brought in, and not a bunch of labels, and they are supporting their family on just what the neighborhood can provide by shopping there. Down at the end of my road is a hamburger stand, and it's called Junkyard Dogs. So if you want to look that up, and it's in a place called Lancaster. The place that I live, the little hamlet that I live in and on this farmland, is called Lancaster. And so you can go on Google Earth and look up Junkyard Dogs, and it's just down, it's within walking distance. Well, I got to looking at that. There's a little antique store next to it. So in our neighborhoods and in our country areas, we're going to find, I believe, that we don't have to get, one of the reasons that the commercial area is where it is it's all commercially licensed, and it will say, this is commercially licensed, you can only sell stuff in a commercial place. But we're going to find it might go back to the old ways, which would be an absolute delight, so that we can take our children on a walk and go to a shop, or just have a different sort of mood, and also maybe buy a pair of shoes from a real cobbler who supports his whole family on your family buying their shoes for a lifetime. And so I've thought that there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this, but we're going to be going through some hard times before that happens. And Austen's occasional relish over a slice of old English brawn would, alas, be dieting pleasure I would pass. Thus, I assured myself, if Jane's health advice was any less universal, timeless, and truthful as her love advice, I was going to quickly find out. I braced myself for disappointment and disillusion. Instead, I fell rapidly and deeply in love. Jane's lifestyle diet wasn't just doable in the 21st century, it was an effortless delight. Whether it was learning how to eat like Emma or exercise like Elizabeth, Austen's health strategies were richer in real-world sense and simplicity than all the health books on my nightstand that year. What's more, Jane seemed to be taking the smartest advice from those books and whittling them down in a way I could easily remember, thanks in large part to them being woven into stories I already love, and not just a jumble of boring facts to digest. He doesn't realize that he's on the cusp of being a homeschooler, because that's what we would do. In the beginning, before there was curriculum available and we didn't know we could get the books from the Christian schools, we would just take whatever we had. I had a set of books about different countries of the world. They were faded old-time life books from the 1950s, and we just used what we had, what the information was that was in there. And I had a dictionary, and I had a globe, and we just used what we had and turned it, put life into it. So he says, thanks in large part to them being woven into stories I already love, and not just a jumble of boring facts to digest. That's one of the biggest problems with school and teaching school, is they teach boring facts, which they expect the students to digest in order to succeed, and they have nothing to do with life. And that is one of the benefits of homeschooling and me homeschooling you. And now I think a lot of you could be self-educated. You know how to do it now because I've told you how you can learn and you can improve yourself in so many ways. You can kind of learn and draw conclusions yourself, and this is what it's all about. And so you can homeschool yourself and you can say, I have been self-educated. Getting healthy with Jane truly felt as elegant and graceful as everything else in Austen world. No starvation tactics, no body shaming, no sweaty workouts here. Just a calm and civilized strategy for what I naturally needed to return to a bloom of full health Regency style. The Jane Austen Diet is the blueprint for embracing that strategy for yourself, a focus on Jane's little-known food and fitness secrets and why they hold spectacular relevance today. You know, since I learned, the last 2 chapters that I read to you were on their physical exercise and their air and some of the food, but it has changed my perspective so much that I feel that I have reversed some of my health problems. My skin has improved, and my thinking, I am more able to grasp a thought that I had a thought, it was way over here, and I want to hang on to it so that I can bring that forth, and it's able to come forth more easily. Because while a lot has changed in the last 3 centuries since Austen lived and wrote, i.e. a love you text seems more likely than a quilled letter from Captain Wentworth these days, our bodies have certainly not. You know, I've often said, every generation has to learn the same things. We all have to learn, mankind doesn't improve just because time has come forth and we're in the modern era. We're not any better than the first century people. We're not any better than the people in Adam's time. Because every generation has to learn character. They have to learn to get by in life and how to absorb the goodness of it. Everybody has to learn it, where no person has, the communists like to say that man has progressed to this stage and that stage, and then they want to control us and everything, but they still have the same moral problems. They still have the same physical problems as ever. And he says our bodies have not changed. If anything, what Jane understood about our bodies is more useful, refreshing, and scientifically sensible now than ever before. Austen had the blissful luxury of living before the rise of the modern fad diet. Oh, yeah. And those diets always made us fatter, didn't they? Because they deprived us of so much emotional nutrition and food nutrition, that we just overreact afterwards and eat more than ever. There were no carb revolutions to march in, no zones to fall out of, no calories to count, or Paleolithic cavemen to copy. Jane simply approached health, food, and exercise in the wonderful words of persuasion, unshackled and free to rely on nature, organic experience, and clever observations to figure out something seemingly impossible, the modern biological equivalent of marrying Mr. Darcy, how to slim down and eat smart without losing your sanity or self-esteem. How cleverly Jane figured it all out will be explored in the following pages. A breakfast to supper, morning to night guide to her Regency recipe to total wellness for the 21st century. No bonnets, curtsies, or pickled pig required. I promise. More accurately, Jane promises. Her name is mentioned first on this book's cover because these unique and wonderful insights are hers and hers alone. I was simply lucky enough to stumble upon them. Like Mr. Knightley, I do not pretend to her genius. Though if you're looking for a Regency-style boot camp within these covers for Austen to blow her whistle and whip you back into shape with a loud drop and give me 20, dear, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong English spinster. The Austen of incandescent health and happiness is the same Austen we've always cherished, the kind, safe, witty brightener of life, always impatient to restore everybody to tolerable comfort. You've already let her into your heart. It's time to let Jane have a crack at your health. After all, As she most reassuringly pledged, "You will soon be better now. You know I always cure you when I come." Was that in Persuasion? Was that Anne? I can be no judge of what the habit of self-doctoring may do. Both Jane and I can make a few professional boasts. She, a famous observer of everything that makes humans tick. I, a classically trained chef with a studious spot for English literature and food history. Neither of us, however, is a doctor, and while the insights of this book present the timeless body truth in Jane's fiction, passed down to an audience as wide and varied as Austen's modern fans, be sure to consult your trusted apothecary, physician, if medical questions arise. And I was reading a quote by Jane Austen yesterday. Let me see. What was it? It was that if you had a cup of tea every day, it would keep the apothecary away. Yes, that was Jane Austen quote. So, ladies, that was the introduction. And I'm not starting over. I'm just going to read the ones that I did not read before. And I hope you're enjoying it. And I'm benefiting from it absolutely wonderfully. So here I am in blissful captivity at home. And many of you are home more and learning how to better yourself as a person at home. And if you're homeschooling your children, you will notice that you are being noticed more, and you start to change yourself. You change your habits. You change you stop arguing all the time because they're picking up your habits. Everything you do will be watched, and that is why you have to pay attention to your character. That is why I'm reading things like this book and the Jane Austen book and other things, is because it has a lot to do with character. Now, one thing I want to leave you with a household hint, and that is to walk through your house and notice how you breathe when you come across something that's aggravating you, that pile of stuff that you didn't get sorted out, and how you breathe when you walk past something that has been placed in a certain way, and it cheers you up and it lifts you up and it gives you comfort. And pay attention to this, because we need to have a record of our own health. And if you had a little journal, maybe an art journal or any kind of a little journal, to take note of this. The other day, I was feeling tense when I got around my letter writing box because it was disheveled and I couldn't find the stamps and stuff. And I started to breathe in a shallow way. And then I also walked past, on the way to this letterbox, a little table that just had a lantern on it, and that was all. It was sitting on top of a book. And how that made me smile and how that made me relax. And so just observe, and that's how you get your house the way that you want it and the way that other people might be inspired by, is to go through it and into every corner and say, I need to cover those cords up, or I need to clean off this, or I need to just make it so that it's more pleasant to look at. And just everybody is different, and everybody's house is different. And that is one way you can analyze how your house has comfort and appeal to you. Now, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the going outdoors and how. Now, I live in Oregon after having lived in Texas for a number of years. My father was born in Texas, and he and my mother went to Alaska to homestead and raise 7 children. And then in 1967, we all moved to Australia, to Tasmania, Australia. And one of the things that I noticed was that Oregon is absolutely so beautiful that it could be the Garden of England. And it almost became an English territory. But there was a big fight called, they called it in the history books, the San Juan Pig. And in the olden days, when there were armies around, like the British Army and the American Army, they would raise their own livestock, the chickens and the pigs and so forth. And I guess one of the pigs from one of the armies wandered into the camp of the other one, and there was a big fight about it, and the English pulled out or something. But Oregon missed its calling, because it really could be more Englishy in what they can do with it. They don't do anything with it that I can see as far as there's a few state-operated places that try to look really nice and the gardens, but it's so beautiful that so much more could be done with it. And so I believe that this scenery around here, and I've been putting pictures on here for you to see, that they should inspire artists and writers, poets, gardeners, landscapers, planners, and musicians, composers. It should just inspire even people ladies like me who are sewists, to just inspire your sewing and your wardrobe and the things that you do that would reflect on this beautiful, beautiful country. And it's sad to see them put real unbeautiful structures and buildings to put things in that don't really go with the countryside. But going for a walk helps a lot because you can appreciate all the beauty around you that nobody else does. Now, also, I wanted to bring up the politeness situation. And I just want to end that with this politeness situation, because in hard times, especially in these strange political times, we're always thinking about how we might end up in a shelter or a camp with other people that we don't know, or maybe some that we do. And so while this may never happen, I've always thought that we need to prepare ourselves in politeness so that if we did, and that no one would object to us being there. No one would say, if she's going to be here, I'm not going to stay in this place. And also to prepare ourselves to be polite and to be surrounded by other people and not make life miserable for them. And I think as older women too, the elderly women especially, need to learn not to argue all the time with every single thing. They need to learn not to contradict everything everyone says. They need to not try to be one smarter than everybody else and know it all. Just if someone wants to give you a piece of information, you just appreciate it and that's it. But you don't have to tell them everything you know about it. And the things that aggravate people, we don't always know. But let's be sensitive to this, because if it ever came to a point where people would have a choice with who they bunked with, that they wouldn't say, I will not go anywhere that woman goes. Some of us have our favorites and some of us don't. So ladies, and then if your children and you're listening to this, your brothers and sisters, would they say, I want to live where my sister goes. I want to go where my brother goes. I want to be with my brother. Or would they say, I can't wait to get out of here because he is such a pest. So ladies, let's work on that. That might be cute when we're young, but all these little things that happen when you're children, if they are not trained out of it and gently corrected and shown where that's going to go, and a mother needs to sit down with one of the children who, if particularly there's a lot of complaining about them, find out what it is and coach them gently to say, you're going to grow up and your brother may never want to see you. You're going to grow up and these things become more pronounced in your personality, so you have to train yourself out of them. Would you like me to help you? I'll just correct you every time. I'll remind you every time you're doing something that's aggravating someone else, and we'll just do it because I love you and because we're friends. I'm not going to use it as to put a wedge between us or to make us dislike each other. But a child who's raised to listen to his parents will and willingly will be a lot more pleasant to be around. So it's very important that parents, especially the mom, because she's home, spend a little time with them, with their manners and their politeness. So ladies, I hope this has done you a bit of good, and I want to thank you for coming. I'm honored that you chose this to listen to, and please go to the post where this is so you can see the other things that I've put on it. So thank you very much. I'll see you later. Bye.